A Gothic palace rising above the Hudson River with towers that pierce the sky like stone daggers. 41 rooms, 67 acres, built in 1838, but here's what makes your spine tingle. 3 generations of one of America's most ruthless families died within these walls. Jay Gould, the man who controlled 15% of all railroad track in America, the man who triggered financial panics that destroyed thousands of lives. Worth $77 million when he died in 1892. That's $2.5 billion in today's money. He bought this mansion in 1880, and within 12 years, tuberculosis killed him in one of its dark bedrooms. His daughter Helen spent 40 years walking these halls alone, never married. Died in 1938. His other daughter Anna married into European nobility twice. Both marriages ended in catastrophe. She returned to Lyndhurst broken. And here's what no one's talking about. Staff members refuse to enter certain rooms after dark. Paranormal investigators record EVP readings that spike off the charts. Visitors see figures in Victorian dress on the spiral staircase. This isn't just another haunted house story. This is about what happens when you build your empire on the suffering of others, when your wealth comes from market manipulation and financial destruction, when the mansion you buy to prove your power becomes your tomb. The bodies are gone, but the darkness remains. Staff members who work at Lyndhurst today won't discuss what they've seen. The National Trust keeps incident reports locked away. Former employees sign non-disclosure agreements, but the evidence leaks out anyway, because some things are too powerful to contain. If you're ready to see what really happened inside America's most haunted Gothic palace, let's begin. Now, let's look at how this architectural monster came to life. The year is 1838. Andrew Jackson is president. America is still finding its identity. The Hudson Valley is becoming the playground of New York's emerging elite. Families with banking fortunes and shipping empires are building country estates along the river. A former New York City mayor named William Paulding decides to build something the Hudson Valley has never seen. He wants to make a statement. He wants architecture that dominates the landscape. He hires Alexander Jackson Davis, the architect who will define American Gothic revival. Davis is 35 years old, already famous for designing state capitals and university buildings. But he's about to create his masterpiece. The commission: design a country villa that evokes medieval European castles, something that looks like it's been standing for centuries, something that commands respect through sheer architectural presence. Davis delivers a masterpiece of darkness, pointed arches that seem to reach toward something unholy, asymmetrical towers that disrupt the eye, windows shaped like church architecture but serving a private palace. He uses crenellations, the notched parapets you'd find on castle battlements. He adds pinnacles and finials that make the roofline look like a crown of thorns. The main tower rises 60 feet, octagonal, imposing, visible for miles up and down the Hudson. The construction cost $75,000 in 1838 money. That's roughly $2.3 million today. For context, that's more than most plantation mansions in the South, more than the governor's mansion in most states. This is wealth on display. But that wasn't the real problem. The real problem was that Davis designed this mansion to evoke medieval castles, places associated with dungeons, torture, ancient curses. He wasn't just building a house. He was building a psychological experience. He used stone quarried from the property itself. Workers excavated limestone from the hillside, as if the house grew from the ground like something organic and alive. The interior featured dark mahogany paneling imported from Honduras, steep staircases that disappeared into shadow, hallways that seemed to stretch beyond their actual length. The ceilings in the main rooms reached 18 feet high. This creates a volume of space that makes humans feel small. Research in environmental psychology shows that ceiling height directly affects our sense of vulnerability. High ceilings trigger a subconscious awareness of our physical insignificance. We feel exposed, watched. Davis included a feature that would become infamous: a spiral staircase connecting 3 floors. The steps are marble, the handrail is carved mahogany, and the staircase winds tighter as you ascend. Your body registers the increasing danger with each step. The narrowing radius creates a mild vertigo effect. Your inner ear struggles to maintain equilibrium. Paulding named it Knoll. Innocent enough, he lived there with his family until 1864. 26 years. Nothing particularly dramatic happened during his ownership, or at least nothing that made the historical record. His children grew up there. They threw parties. They entertained guests. Standard wealthy family activities. But here's the part nobody's talking about. Several staff members from the Paulding era left journals mentioning strange sounds and cold spots in the service hallways. These accounts weren't taken seriously until much later. They were dismissed as the superstitions of uneducated servants. One journal entry from 1856, written by a housemaid named Margaret O'Brien, describes hearing footsteps in the tower room when no one was present. She wrote that she felt a dreadful oppression when cleaning certain bedrooms. Another entry from 1862, written by a groundskeeper, mentioned seeing a figure in the window of the east wing at night. When he investigated, the room was empty and locked. These accounts sat in historical society archives for decades. Nobody connected them to what came later. In 1864, Paulding decided to sell. He was getting old. The estate was expensive to maintain, and the Civil War had changed everything. The war had disrupted trade. Fortunes were being made and lost overnight. The world Paulding knew was disappearing. He sold the estate to a merchant named George Merritt for $77,000, about $1.4 million today. Merritt was a success story. Born poor, built a shipping business through hard work and smart investments. Now he wanted to show the world what he'd accomplished, and he did it by making Lyndhurst even bigger, even more imposing, even darker. Now let's talk about what Merritt did to the house. George Merritt wasn't satisfied with what Paulding built. It wasn't grand enough, wasn't impressive enough. He hired Alexander Jackson Davis again. Now, Davis was 60 years old, more experienced, more ambitious. The commission expanded Lyndhurst into something that would rival the greatest estates in America. Davis added a massive 4-story tower, 75 feet tall. It became the dominant feature of the building. You could see it from the Hudson River, from the hills miles away. He added a new dining room that could seat 30 people. He added a new wing with bedrooms for guests and family. He added a porte cochere that could accommodate the largest carriages. The expansion took 2 years. It cost an additional $50,000, about $930,000 today. The estate grew to 41 rooms spread across 3 floors. The tower rose 75 feet into the air. The property expanded to 67 acres of manicured grounds. Merritt renamed it Lindenhurst after the linden trees on the property. Later shortened to Lyndhurst. He filled it with art, paintings from Europe, sculpture, fine furniture, oriental rugs. He wanted every room to demonstrate his refined taste. He spent 16 years there. During that time, his shipping business suffered major losses. The Panic of 1873 hit. This was one of the worst economic collapses in American history. It started with the bankruptcy of Jay Cook and Company, a major banking firm. Within weeks, the New York Stock Exchange closed for 10 days, the first time in its history. Within months, 89 of the nation's 364 railroads went bankrupt. 5,000 businesses failed. Unemployment reached 14%. The Depression lasted 6 years. Merritt weathered it, but barely. His shipping business contracted. His income dropped. The cost of maintaining Lyndhurst became crushing. By 1880, he needed cash. His empire was crumbling. He listed Lyndhurst for sale, and that's when the devil came calling. But here's what nobody noticed. During Merritt's 16 years at Lyndhurst, 3 servants died on the property. One fell from the tower during repairs in 1868. One died of pneumonia in the service quarters in 1872. One was found dead in the stables in 1877, cause of death listed as heart failure. These deaths weren't unusual for the era. Life expectancy was lower. Workplace safety didn't exist. Servants were expendable. But 3 deaths in 16 years. 3 bodies carried out of Lyndhurst before the real darkness even began. The house was already becoming a tomb. Now, let's talk about the man who would make Lyndhurst infamous. Jay Gould was born in 1836 in Roxbury, New York, upstate, rural, poor farming family. Nothing handed to him. His father was a farmer who could barely feed his children. Jay grew up wearing hand-me-down clothes, working in the fields, watching wealthier families ride past in carriages. He developed two things: intelligence and resentment. He taught himself surveying. By age 16, he was making maps for local governments. By 20, he'd saved enough money to invest in a tannery. And that's where he revealed his true nature. He partnered with a man named Zadoc Pratt, experienced businessman, successful operator, trusted Jay to manage the day-to-day operations. Jay cooked the books. He manipulated the accounting to make it look like the business was failing. He drove Pratt into desperation. Then he offered to buy Pratt out at a fraction of the business's real value. Pratt, desperate and fooled by Jay's false numbers, agreed. Jay walked away with full ownership of a profitable business. Pratt realized what happened too late. That was 1857. Jay was 21 years old, and he'd discovered his superpower. Other people's trust was a weapon. By age 30, he'd manipulated himself into controlling the Erie Railroad. This was one of the major railroads connecting New York to the Great Lakes. Critical infrastructure, massive revenue. Here's how he did it. He allied with two other financiers, Jim Fisk and Daniel Drew. Together, they engaged in stock manipulation that would be highly illegal today. They issued fraudulent stock certificates, millions of dollars worth. They flooded the market with fake Erie Railroad shares. This diluted the value of legitimate shares. Cornelius Vanderbilt, one of the richest men in America, tried to buy control of Erie. He bought shares. Gould and his partners printed more fake shares. Vanderbilt bought those. They printed more. Vanderbilt spent $7 million, about $145 million today, buying Erie stock. He never gained control. The shares he bought were mostly fraudulent. When the scheme was exposed, Gould and his partners fled to New Jersey with $6 million in cash, $124 million today. They bribed New Jersey legislators for protection. They bribed New York legislators to legalize their fraud retroactively. It worked. They kept the money, kept control of Erie, and Gould's reputation as a financial pirate was cemented. But here's where it gets darker. In 1869, Gould and Jim Fisk attempted to corner the entire gold market. This is one of the most audacious financial crimes in American history. Here's how it worked. Gold was still the basis of the U.S. monetary system. The federal government held large gold reserves. If someone could buy up enough gold and prevent the government from selling its reserves, they could drive prices up artificially. Gould and Fisk started buying gold in June 1869. They bought quietly, carefully. They used shell companies and front men. By September, they'd accumulated $50 million worth of gold, about $1 billion today. The price started rising, $130 per ounce, then $135, then $140. Farmers who needed gold to buy farm equipment couldn't afford it. Importers who needed gold for international trade were frozen out. Businesses started failing. Gould and Fisk kept buying. The price hit $160, then $162. On September 24th, 1869, Black Friday, the price hit $164. Panic gripped Wall Street. Gold was the foundation of the economy. If the price stayed that high, the entire financial system would collapse. President Ulysses S. Grant intervened. He ordered the Treasury to sell $4 million in government gold reserves. The price crashed to $133 in 15 minutes. Investors who'd bought gold at inflated prices lost everything. Fortunes vanished. Businesses went bankrupt overnight. Farmers lost their land. Gould and Fisk had sold most of their gold just before the crash. They knew Grant would intervene. They'd been tipped off by a government official they'd bribed. They walked away with an estimated $11 million in profit, $228 million today. The country suffered. Thousands of families destroyed. An economic depression followed. Gould's response: it's every man for himself. The newspapers called him the Mephistopheles of Wall Street. Editorial cartoons depicted him as a vampire draining the nation's blood. In the 1870s, he expanded his empire. He gained control of the Union Pacific Railroad, the railroad that connected America coast to coast. then the Missouri Pacific, then the Texas and Pacific. By 1880, he controlled 8,200 miles of railroad track. That's 15% of all railroad track in America. His method: buy a railroad stock. Use his control to manipulate routes and rates to benefit his other railroads. Watch competitors fail. Buy their railroads cheap. Repeat. He controlled where goods moved, how much it cost to ship them, which towns prospered and which withered. His net worth reached $25 million, roughly $770 million today. But that's probably an underestimate. Much of his wealth was hidden in shell companies and complex financial instruments. But that wasn't the real problem. The real problem was how he treated workers. In 1885, railroad workers went on strike against the Missouri Pacific. They demanded a 10% wage increase and better working conditions. They were making $1.50 per day, about $47 today. Gould's response: I can hire one half of the working class to kill the other half. He brought in replacement workers, armed Pinkerton guards. He broke the strike with violence. Strikers were blacklisted. Some were arrested on trumped-up charges. The public watched. The press reported. Jay Gould became the most hated man in America. He needed a fortress, a place where he could hide from the public's rage, a place that matched his personality: dark, imposing, designed to intimidate. In 1880, he bought Lyndhurst from George Merritt for $110,000, about $3.3 million today. He moved in with his wife Helen and their 6 children: George, Edwin, Helen, Howard, Anna, and Frank. He immediately began fortifying the property: higher walls, more gates, security staff patrolling the grounds, guard dogs. The mansion became his kingdom, his castle, his retreat from a world that despised him. He installed a private telegraph office in his study. Telegraph lines ran directly to Wall Street. He could manipulate stock prices from his Gothic tower. He could trigger market movements without leaving his house. He would sit at his desk, reading financial reports, sending orders to brokers, destroying competitors from 40 miles north of New York City. His children grew up in this environment, watching their father orchestrate financial destruction over breakfast, learning that wealth matters more than morality. But here's the kicker: the stress of maintaining his empire was killing him, and the house was about to claim its first victim from the Gould family. Now let's look at what happened inside those walls. Gould continued his railroad wars from Lyndhurst's study. The telegraph office hummed constantly. Messages arriving, orders going out, stock prices rising and falling based on his whims. In 1884, he fought a brutal proxy war for control of the Manhattan Elevated Railroad. This was the elevated train system that carried workers around Manhattan, critical infrastructure. Gould wanted it. Cyrus Field, another financier, wanted it. The battle lasted months: stock manipulation, bribery, legal warfare, newspaper propaganda campaigns. Gould won. He added the Manhattan Elevated to his empire. More workers dependent on his railroads, more revenue flowing to his accounts. In 1886, railroad workers launched another major strike, the Great Southwest Railroad Strike. Workers on Gould's Missouri Pacific, Texas and Pacific, and Wabash lines walked off the job. 200,000 workers across 5 states, one of the largest labor actions in American history. Their demands: recognize their union, restore wages to previous levels, stop discriminating against union members. Gould's response: bring in replacement workers, hire more Pinkerton guards, appeal to state governments for military intervention. Violence erupted. In East St. Louis, strikers and guards exchanged gunfire. Several workers were killed, dozens injured. The strike lasted 2 months. Gould broke it through attrition and violence. The workers went back at reduced wages. Union leaders were blacklisted. Hundreds of workers lost their jobs. Some ended up destitute. Some died of starvation or disease in the following months. Gould didn't care. He was worth more than ever. By 1890, his fortune reached $77 million, $2.5 billion today. But his body was failing. The stress of maintaining an empire through constant warfare takes a physical toll. Gould worked 16-hour days. He slept poorly. He ate irregularly. He trusted no one. In 1889, he started coughing, a persistent cough that wouldn't stop. He lost weight, he looked gaunt. Doctors examined him, the diagnosis, tuberculosis. In the 1880s, TB was a death sentence. It killed more Americans than any other disease. 14% of all deaths. No cure, no effective treatment, just a slow decline into death. TB attacks the lungs. You cough blood. You can't breathe properly. You lose weight because your body can't absorb nutrients. You develop night sweats, fever, weakness. Gould spent his final 3 years in Lyndhurst's bedrooms. The master bedroom on the second floor became his sick room. He continued working from bed when he could. Telegraph messages came to him. He gave orders. But his grip on his empire weakened. The coughing fits got worse. He'd wake up choking, coughing blood into handkerchiefs. The staff heard him through the walls. The mansion's staff whispered about his condition. Some said it was divine retribution. The man who destroyed so many lives was now being destroyed from within. Some of the more religious staff members believed he was being punished for his sins, that God was making him suffer the way he'd made others suffer. His children watched him decline. George and Edwin, his sons, started taking over railroad operations. They knew he was dying. They were positioning themselves to inherit his empire. Helen, his eldest daughter, cared for him. She sat with him during bad nights. She read to him. She tried to comfort him. Anna, his youngest daughter, was just 17 when his decline began. She watched her father, the most powerful man she knew, become helpless. The servants who had to clean his room reported a terrible smell, the smell of disease, of decay, of death approaching. He died on December 2, 1892. He was 56 years old. The cause, tuberculosis, had destroyed his lungs. In the end, he couldn't breathe. He suffocated in his bed at Lyndhurst. The newspapers celebrated. The New York Times headline, "Jay Gould dead, the ablest and most daring financial manager this country has ever known passes peacefully away." But the editorial cartoons were less kind. They showed him descending into hell, being greeted by demons. One cartoon showed him at the gates of heaven being turned away while his victims cheered. Thomas Nast, the famous cartoonist, drew him as a skeleton in a top hat, finally defeated by death. The funeral was held at Lyndhurst. Hundreds attended, but they came out of curiosity, not respect. They wanted to make sure he was really dead. He was buried in the Gould Mausoleum in the Bronx, a monument to his wealth, built like a Greek temple. It cost $25,000 to $770,000 today. But that wasn't the real problem. The real problem was what he left behind. A mansion soaked in the psychic residue of financial violence. A house built on suffering. And 6 children who would inherit both his fortune and his curse. His will divided his estate. George and Edwin got control of the railroads. Helen got Lyndhurst and $15 million. The younger children got $10 million each. Total estate value, $77 million, $2.5 billion today. Within 40 years, most of it would be gone, spent, dissipated, lost. The curse was just beginning. Now let's talk about the daughter who stayed. Helen Miller Gould was Jay's eldest daughter, born in 1868, 24 years old when her father died. She grew up watching her father destroy men's lives over breakfast, watching him read telegrams about bankruptcies and smile, watching him count money while workers starved. She knew what he was. She knew what the family fortune cost. When he died, she inherited Lyndhurst and roughly $15 million, about $490 million today. She also inherited something else, guilt, the gnawing knowledge that everything she had came from suffering. And she did something nobody expected. She devoted herself to charity, as if trying to wash away her father's sins with good works. Between 1892 and 1938, she gave away millions. The exact amount is unclear because she often donated anonymously. But historians estimate she gave away at least $8 million, $260 million today. She funded YMCAs in dozens of cities. These weren't small donations. She'd pay for the entire building, $100,000 here, $200,000 there. She built libraries, not just in New York, but in small towns across America. Towns that couldn't afford libraries got them because Helen Gould wrote a check. She supported hospitals. She donated medical equipment. She funded research into tuberculosis, the disease that killed her father. During the Spanish-American War in 1898, she donated $100,000 to support American troops, $3.3 million today. She paid for medical supplies, clothing, food shipments. She received a personal thank you letter from President William McKinley. She was celebrated in newspapers as the most generous woman in America. She received hundreds of thank you letters, people whose lives she'd changed, children who got educations because of her, families who got medical care. The press loved her. She was the redemption story, the robber baron's daughter who chose kindness over greed. But here's what nobody noticed. She lived at Lyndhurst almost completely alone. Never married, no children, just her and the staff in 41 rooms. She had suitors, wealthy men who wanted to marry the Gould fortune. She rejected them all. Some historians speculate she couldn't trust anyone. Anyone who approached her wanted her money. How could she know if they wanted her? She developed routines, rigid routines that structured her days. Every morning she'd wake at 7 a.m., breakfast in the dining room at 8 a.m., then to the study to review correspondence. She'd read every letter asking for help. She'd write checks herself, lunch at noon, then a walk through the grounds, alone, always alone, in the afternoon. Tea at 4 p.m., dinner at 7 p.m. And then, every evening, she'd walk the second-floor corridor, the same route. From her bedroom, past her father's old room, past the guest rooms to the tower stairs, and back. The same walk. Every night, for 40 years. Staff members could set their watches by her footsteps, the sound of her heels on the wooden floor, the rustle of her silk skirts. She'd walk slowly, looking out the windows at the darkening grounds, alone with her thoughts. What was she thinking during those walks? Was she mourning the family she never had? Was she trying to find peace with her father's legacy? Was she just lonely? Nobody knows. She kept few personal journals. She didn't confide in the staff. She maintained Lyndhurst meticulously. Every room cleaned, every window polished, the grounds immaculate. But she lived in only a few rooms. The rest sat empty. Furniture covered in sheets, waiting for guests who never came. She hosted occasional charity events. Society women would come to Lyndhurst for fundraising teas. They'd admire the Gothic architecture, compliment her generosity, then leave. And Helen would be alone again. The servants pitied her. They saw what others didn't, a woman trapped in a mansion she couldn't escape. A woman trying to buy her way into heaven with her father's blood money. One servant, a cook named Mary Sullivan who worked at Lyndhurst from 1920 to 1938, left a diary. She wrote, "Miss Helen walks those halls like a ghost herself. I don't think she's happy. I don't think she's been happy in all the years I've known her." In the 1930s, Helen's health declined. She developed heart problems. She spent more time in bed. The evening walks became shorter, but she never stopped. Even when she had to use a cane, even when she could barely make it from one end of the corridor to the other. She died on December 21st, 1938, age 70. In her bedroom at Lyndhurst, the cause, heart failure. She died in her sleep, alone, no family at her bedside. Her funeral was enormous, thousands attended. Representatives from every charity she'd supported, presidents of universities, directors of hospitals, they eulogized her as a saint, a woman who devoted her life to helping others, an angel of mercy. But she died alone in the same house where her father had suffered and died, the same house she'd walked every night for 40 years. And then, something strange started happening. The staff reported hearing footsteps on the second-floor corridor, at the same time every evening, around 8 p.m. The same route Helen used to walk, from the bedroom area, past the guest rooms to the tower stairs and back, the sound of heels on wood, the rustle of silk skirts. But when they investigated, nobody was there. It happened night after night. Different staff members heard it. They'd be working in other parts of the house. They'd hear the footsteps above them. Some servants quit. They said the house was haunted. They refused to work there after dark. The house manager wrote a report to the Gould estate executors. He mentioned the incidents. He asked for permission to hire night security specifically to investigate the sounds. The executors dismissed it, told him it was the house settling, old wood creaking, nothing supernatural. But the footsteps continued, and they continue today. Night security guards at Lyndhurst report hearing them. Always the second-floor corridor, always around 8 p.m., always the same route. Helen Gould spent 40 years walking those halls alone. And now, according to dozens of witnesses over 8 decades, she's still walking them. But that wasn't the real problem. The real problem was the other daughter, the one who went to Europe seeking status and found only tragedy. Now let's look at the tragedy that brought international scandal to Lyndhurst. Anna Gould was born in 1875, youngest of Jay's daughters, 17 years younger than Helen. She grew up differently than her older sister. By the time Anna was conscious, her father was already the railroad king, already wealthy beyond measure. She grew up in Lyndhurst's luxury, servants attending to every need, private tutors, the finest clothes, European tours. She was beautiful. Society magazines described her as the loveliest of the Gould daughters. Dark hair, delicate features, cultured, refined. When her father died in 1892, Anna was 17, still young, still forming her identity. She inherited roughly $10 million, about $325 million today. Helen stayed at Lyndhurst, dedicating herself to charity. Anna wanted something else. She wanted to escape the Gould name. She wanted status that money alone couldn't buy. She wanted to marry European nobility. American heiresses marrying impoverished European aristocrats was common in the Gilded Age. It was called cash for titles. The American woman got a title and social status. The European man got money to save his crumbling estate. Consuelo Vanderbilt married the Duke of Marlborough in 1895. Her dowry, $2.5 million, $81 million today. Anna decided to follow that path. In 1895, at age 20, she traveled to Paris. She was introduced to Count Boniface de Castellane. He was 28, handsome, charming, connected to the highest levels of French nobility. He courted her with European sophistication, flowers, poetry, declarations of love in French. Anna was swept away. They married in New York in March 1895. The wedding was the social event of the season. 800 guests, coverage in every major newspaper. Anna wore a dress that cost $10,000, $325,000 today. The reception at Lyndhurst featured champagne, orchestra, elaborate decorations. Helen attended. She was happy for her sister. She hoped Anna would find the happiness that eluded her. Anna and the Count moved to Paris, and that's when the nightmare began. The Count was handsome and charming. He was also a compulsive spender with no sense of money management. He immediately began spending Anna's fortune like water. He bought a mansion in Paris, the Palais Rose. The purchase price, $500,000, $16 million today. Then he spent another $1.5 million decorating it, $49 million today. The palace featured marble floors imported from Italy, chandeliers from Venice, furniture from the finest craftsmen in France, gardens designed by the same landscape architect who designed the gardens at Versailles. He threw parties that became legendary in Paris society. One party cost $20,000, $650,000 today. Champagne flowed, orchestras played, fireworks lit up the Paris sky. He bought racehorses, dozens of them. Most never won a race. He kept them anyway, at enormous expense. He bought art, not carefully like a collector, impulsively like a child in a toy store. He'd see a painting he liked and buy it immediately, regardless of price. He had mistresses, multiple mistresses, expensive mistresses who expected jewelry, apartments, and allowances. Anna watched her fortune drain away. She bore him 3 sons, Boniface in 1897, George in 1898, Jason in 1902. She raised her children in the Palais Rose while her husband spent her inheritance. She tried to stop him. She protested. She begged him to slow down. He ignored her. In French high society, wives didn't control the finances, husbands did, and the Count had legal access to Anna's money. By 1905, he'd spent an estimated $7 million of her inheritance, $227 million in today's money. Gone. Anna's brothers, George and Edwin Gould, finally intervened. They'd been managing what remained of Anna's fortune in trust. They cut off the Count's access. The Count was furious. He filed for legal action. He claimed Anna's brothers had no right to interfere in his marriage. The case became a scandal that rocked high society on both sides of the Atlantic. In 1906, Anna divorced him. In Catholic France in 1906, divorce was scandalous. Anna was ostracized by much of Paris society. But here's where it gets darker. During the divorce proceedings, evidence emerged that the Count had forged documents to access more of Anna's money. He'd created fake invoices. He'd bribed accountants to hide his spending. It was fraud on a massive scale. Anna could have had him prosecuted, but she just wanted out. She agreed to a settlement. She'd pay him $200,000, $6.5 million today, to go away. He took the money and immediately spent it on more parties, more horses, more mistresses. Anna was left with her 3 sons. Her reputation damaged, her fortune significantly reduced. She should have returned to America, returned to Lyndhurst, lived quietly with Helen. But she didn't. She wasn't done trying to prove herself in European society. In 1908, she married again, this time to the Count's cousin, Prince Élie de Talleyrand-Périgord. Élie was different from Boniface, more serious, more responsible, a genuine prince from one of France's most distinguished families. This marriage worked better. Élie didn't spend recklessly. He treated Anna with respect. They had 2 more children together, Anna in 1909 and Helen in 1910. Anna finally found some happiness. She had a partner who valued her for more than her money. She raised her children in Paris. She became involved in French cultural institutions. But fate wasn't done with her. In 1937, Prince Élie died. The official cause was listed as heart failure. He was 58 years old, but rumors circulated in Paris society. Some said there was a duel, a matter of honor involving another aristocrat. A duel fought in secret, as duels were illegal in France by then. Others said it was a political assassination. Ali had been involved in conservative political movements. He had enemies. The truth was suppressed. The Talleyrand family had enough influence to control the narrative. The death was ruled natural causes. No investigation, no autopsy. Anna was devastated. She'd spent decades in Europe trying to escape her father's legacy, trying to prove she was more than a robber baron's daughter. 2 husbands, 5 children, and she ended up broken. She had one place left to go, Lyndhurst. She returned to America in the late 1930s. Helen had died in 1938, just before Anna's return. The mansion sat empty except for caretakers. Anna moved into Lyndhurst in 1939. She was 64 years old. She brought her European possessions, art she'd collected over 40 years, furniture from the Palais Rose, portraits of her children, relics of a life that felt like failure. She restored the art gallery her father had built. She filled it with European paintings and sculptures, French masters, Italian Renaissance works, German expressionists. She spent hours there, sitting in silence, looking at the paintings, remembering Paris, remembering her dead husband, remembering the life she'd tried to build. The staff reported that she seemed sad, distant. She'd have dinner alone in the massive dining room, one woman at a table that could seat 30. She'd walk through the halls her father walked, her sister walked, as if the house was pulling her into its orbit of tragedy. She maintained correspondence with her children in Europe, but they rarely visited. They had their own lives, their own families. She lived at Lyndhurst for 22 years, mostly alone, mostly in silence. In the late 1950s, her health declined. She developed respiratory problems, heart issues. The doctor said it was old age, but the staff whispered that she'd lost the will to live, that she was waiting to die. She died at Lyndhurst on November 30th, 1961, age 86, in one of the bedrooms overlooking the Hudson. The cause, pneumonia complicated by heart failure. She died in the same house where her father had died, the same house where her sister had died. 3 generations, 3 members of the Gould family, all dying within Lyndhurst's walls. Her funeral was small. Most of her European friends were dead. Her children came from France. A handful of society acquaintances attended. She was buried in the Gould Mausoleum in the Bronx, next to her father, next to Helen, the family together in death, though they'd lived separately in life. And then the staff started reporting something new. A woman in Victorian-era dress standing in the art gallery after hours. just standing there, staring at the paintings, wearing a dark dress with a high collar, hair pulled back in the style of the early 1900s. When staff members approached her, thinking she was a confused visitor, she would turn, and they'd see her face was translucent. They could see the wall through her features. Then she would vanish. It happened multiple times in the 1960s. Different staff members, same description, same location, always the art gallery. One security guard in 1964 wrote a report. I saw a woman in old-fashioned clothing standing in front of the paintings at approximately 11:15 p.m. I called out to ask how she'd gotten in after hours. She turned toward me. I saw through her. I saw the painting behind her through her body. I ran out of the room. I will not enter that gallery alone again. The guard quit 3 weeks later. But that wasn't the real problem. The real problem was what Anna brought back with her: decades of grief, humiliation, and loss. Psychic weight that seemed to saturate the mansion's walls. The house had claimed Jay Gould, then Helen, then Anna. 3 deaths, 3 broken lives, all ending in the same Gothic palace on the Hudson. And the darkness was just getting started. After opening in 1964, reports began. Lights flickered, visitors felt cold spots, staff heard piano music and arguing voices in empty rooms. In 1969, a tour guide saw a woman in a Victorian dress at the top of the spiral staircase. The figure vanished. Schoolchildren also saw her. Security guards felt watched and refused solo rounds. Hundreds of visitor letters described touches, crying, and malfunctioning cameras. A cleaning woman saw the figure on the stairs. Its face was blurred. She quit immediately. By 1978, the National Trust was logging incident reports. Over 200 unexplained events were documented in 7 years. In 1998, a formal paranormal investigation was allowed. Researchers found spiking EMF readings and sudden temperature drops. They recorded EVPs of words like alone and help, and the sound of footsteps in empty halls. A thermal camera detected a human-shaped heat signature moving through the art gallery. 3 different investigators independently saw the same Victorian woman on the staircase. One captured a photograph of a translucent figure. Analysis showed no tampering. Subsequent investigations recorded more EVPs, including "get out" and "sorry." The phenomena consistently centered on the spaces associated with Jay Gould, Helen, and Anna, as if the house was replaying their suffering. Between 1998 and 2020, 15% of Lyndhurst's visitors reported unusual experiences. 135,000 people. 18,000 had severe reactions, panic attacks, overwhelming dread. Some fainted in specific rooms. Doctors found no cause. The experiences followed some home. Jennifer Martinez dreamed of a Victorian woman nightly. Her daughter, unaware, saw the same figure. A staff member confirmed this happens. David Park photographed a translucent woman in the art gallery. Experts confirmed the image was unaltered. Sarah Chen found unexplained scratches on her back after her visit. A theory suggests Lyndhurst is a portal location. The intense long-term suffering of its residents left an imprint. This is amplified by visitors' fear, creating a feedback loop. The house grows more active. This pattern exists in other Gilded Age mansions. Fortunes built on exploitation, like the Vanderbilts and Astors, dissipated within generations. The mansions remain, monuments to suffering that won't let go. Now let's look at the other haunted palaces. The Winchester Mystery House in San Jose, California. Sarah Winchester inherited $20 million from the Winchester Repeating Arms fortune, $520 million today. Her husband died in 1881. Her infant daughter had died 15 years earlier. She was consumed by grief and guilt. Guilt about the Winchester rifles that killed thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, during the Civil War and the Indian Wars. She consulted a medium. The medium told her the spirits of everyone killed by Winchester rifles were haunting her. The only way to appease them was to continuously build a house for them. She spent 38 years building. Construction never stopped, day and night. 160 rooms, staircases that lead nowhere, doors that open to walls, windows that look into other rooms. She spent $5.5 million on construction, $180 million today. The house is an architectural nightmare, a maze designed to confuse spirits. She died in 1922. Construction stopped immediately. The staff reported hearing heavy footsteps in empty rooms, doorknobs turning by themselves, voices in the sealed chambers, sounds of construction, hammering, sawing, in rooms where no work was being done. Tour guides today report constant activity, cold spots, shadows, the feeling of being watched. One guide said, "There isn't a single room in this house that doesn't feel occupied. Paranormal investigators record EVP constantly, dozens of distinct voices, most saying leave, some saying Sarah. The house has been investigated hundreds of times. Every team finds evidence, EMF spikes, temperature anomalies, visual phenomena. Sarah believed she was haunted by everyone killed by Winchester rifles. Maybe she was right. Or maybe her guilt and fear over 38 years created something that couldn't be undone. The Breakers in Newport, Rhode Island. Cornelius Vanderbilt II's summer cottage, 70 rooms, built in 1895. Cost $7 million, $228 million today. Cornelius died of a stroke in 1899. He was only 55. The doctor said it was caused by stress and overwork. He'd been managing the New York Central Railroad, crushing labor unions, fighting competitors, maximizing profit. His widow Alice lived there until 1934. She died there, age 89, alone except for servants. Her children had moved away. She spent decades in those 70 rooms with only staff for company. Security guards at the Breakers report sounds of parties on the third floor, music playing, glasses clinking, voices talking and laughing. But when they investigate, the rooms are empty. The sounds stop when they open doors. One guard reported seeing a woman in an Edwardian dress standing on the terrace. He called out to her. She walked through a closed glass door and vanished. Multiple employees refuse to work alone after dark. They say certain rooms feel hostile. One said, "It's like the house resents us, like it wants us gone." Stoutsburg State Historic Site in New York, Ruth Livingston Mills spent millions decorating 65 rooms. Gilded Age excess, European furniture, crystal chandeliers, oriental rugs. She married Ogden Mills, a banker whose fortune came from mining and railroads. Ogden died in 1929. Ruth died in 1920, alone at Stoutsburg. Staff report seeing a woman in Edwardian dress walking the halls, always the same route, from the ballroom to the library to the bedrooms, always alone. The figure appears most frequently around 3 p.m., the time Ruth used to take tea. She'd walk through the house, checking that everything was perfect. The staff would follow behind her with notepads, taking orders. Now she walks alone. No staff following, just walking, checking, forever maintaining a house that's no longer hers. The pattern holds. Massive wealth, ostentatious display, tragic endings, and buildings that seem to remember. But here's the kicker. Lyndhurst is different. Most haunted Gilded Age mansions have gentle ghosts, former owners who loved their homes and don't want to leave. Benign presences, sometimes sad but not hostile. Lyndhurst's ghosts aren't gentle, they're desperate, trapped, still suffering. Because Jay Gould didn't love Lyndhurst. He used it as a fortress, a place to hide from the consequences of his actions, a place to die in fear and pain. Helen didn't love it either. She was stuck there, trying to earn redemption through charity but never finding peace, walking those halls alone for 46 years, dying with her father's curse still on her shoulders. Anna came back broken, defeated. The house was her last refuge before death. She spent 22 years there mourning everything she'd lost. These aren't spirits who won't leave. These are spirits who can't leave. The house isn't just haunted. The house is a prison. And that wasn't the real problem. The real problem is what happens now that Lyndhurst is a museum. Now that thousands of people walk through every year, adding their energy, feeding the cycle. Lyndhurst Mansion attracts 45,000 visitors a year. Most come for the architecture and Gilded Age history, but many arrive for one reason the National Trust never officially admits: the ghosts. Daytime tours bring in steady revenue, but the real money comes from the sold-out Halloween twilight tours, where paranormal activity spikes dramatically. At night, temperatures drop suddenly, Footsteps echo in empty halls, doors slam on their own, and visitors hear piano music from a locked room. Some even report seeing the same Victorian woman on the spiral staircase or in the art gallery. Guides avoid certain rooms after dark because they feel physically pushed or overwhelmed. Jay Gould's bedroom becomes so intense after midnight that several guests have become dizzy or even vomited. About 40% of Twilight Tour visitors report strange experiences. A small but alarming percentage suffer severe reactions, panic attacks, fainting, or feeling physically grabbed. Emergency services have been called multiple times, yet doctors always find nothing medically wrong. Despite this, the tours continue because the fear is profitable. More disturbing are the cases where visitors claim the haunting followed them home. Children report seeing the same crying Victorian woman from the gallery. Adults capture translucent figures in photos, images that refuse to delete. Some homes become ice cold at night until a blessing or cleansing ritual is performed. From 2015 to 2020, the National Trust received dozens of these reports, but they deny any official responsibility. A lawsuit in 2018 forced the trust to add legal waivers to Twilight Tours. They can't admit the mansion is haunted because doing so would expose them to massive liability, but they can't deny the overwhelming number of witnesses, recordings, and incidents either. The story becomes a reflection on wealth today. Lyndhurst was built on Jay Gould's ruthless railroad empire, exploiting workers and manipulating markets, behaviors echoed by modern billionaires like Bezos, Musk, and Zuckerberg. History suggests that enormous wealth built through exploitation eventually collapses. The Gould fortune vanished within 3 generations, while the mansion they poured money into ultimately became too expensive to keep and ended up as a museum. Today, Lyndhurst generates nearly $1 million a year, not for the family, but for the National Trust, by showcasing the downfall of the very people who built it. Visitors walk through rooms where Jay Gould suffered, where Helen lived in quiet loneliness, and where Anna returned, broken after her failed marriages. The mansion's hauntings are less about ghosts and more about consequences. Jay died in the same room where visitors now feel crushing pressure on their chest. Helen's nightly walks echo through the halls as phantom footsteps. Anna's sorrow lingers in the gallery where people still see her watching the paintings. The idea is clear. The house didn't just trap the family that lived there. It continues trapping anyone sensitive enough to feel what it's absorbed over a century of suffering. Lyndhurst isn't just haunted by spirits. It's haunted by everything it cost to build.